The Obsidian Scale was the kind of establishment where questions weren't asked, and credits flowed like liquid starlight. Perched on the edge of Kepler Station's twilight district, it catered to a clientele that preferred shadows to spotlights. Nancy had worked there for 3 years, long enough to recognize trouble when it walked through the door. Tonight, trouble wore an ill-fitting server's uniform. Nancy balanced her tray with practiced ease, weaving through tables occupied by Vraxian merchants, Centauri smugglers, and the occasional human expatriate looking to forget Earth existed. Her eyes, however, tracked the new waiter, the one who moved wrong, stood wrong, breathed wrong. At the corner booth sat Parker Dravonis, and that's where everything got complicated. Parker wasn't human, despite the name her parents had given her. She was Dracari, one of the ancient dragon-blooded who'd ruled the Andromeda sector for 10,000 years before humanity had even discovered fire. Her scales shimmered like molten copper under the establishment's dim lighting, and her golden eyes missed nothing. As the untitled head of the Dravonis Syndicate, she commanded more power than most planetary governors. She was also Nancy's most regular customer, and possibly the only reason Nancy was still alive. After witnessing 3 separate assassination attempts in this very restaurant, the fake waiter moved toward Parker's table, his gait too stiff, his smile too practiced. Nancy's gut twisted. She'd seen this dance before: the nervous approach, the concealed weapon, the moment of violence that would shatter the evening's fragile peace. But Nancy was human, and humans had survived the galaxy's darkest corners not through strength or longevity, but through sheer, stubborn adaptability. She grabbed a cloth napkin from her station, produced a pen from her apron, and scrawled for words as she walked. Listen. Fake waiter, armed, left side. Parker was reviewing a data pad when Nancy approached, her movements casual, unhurried. To anyone watching, she was simply a waitress doing her job. She set down a fresh glass of Tarvasian whiskey, Parker's usual, and placed the napkin beside it, her fingers brushing the fabric just enough to draw attention. Parker's eyes flicked to the napkin. Her expression didn't change, but Nancy saw the minute dilation of her pupils, the slight tension in her jaw. The Dracari's hand moved to the glass, lifting it in a toast to some invisible companion, while her other hand palmed the napkin with supernatural grace. The fake waiter was 3 tables away now. Nancy returned to her station, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd done what she could. The rest was up to Parker, and whatever security the dragon boss had hidden throughout the establishment. 2 tables away, the fake waiter's hand drifted toward his left side, where Nancy had spotted the telltale bulge of a plasma pistol beneath his jacket. Parker sat down, her glass, and smiled, a terrifying expression that revealed rows of crystalline teeth designed to tear through starship hull plating. She raised one clawed hand and snapped her fingers. The lights died. In the darkness, Nancy heard the distinctive whine of charging weapons, the crash of overturning furniture, and a very human scream of surprise. Emergency lighting flickered on 3 seconds later, bathing the restaurant in crimson. The fake waiter was on the ground, disarmed and unconscious, surrounded by 3 of Parker's guards, Dracari enforcers, whose scales made them nearly invisible. In low light, Parker herself hadn't moved from her booth, though her eyes now glowed with an inner fire that made the emergency lights seem dim by comparison. Nancy, Parker's voice rolled through the restaurant like distant thunder. A word, if you please. Every patron in the Obsidian Scale turned to stare. Nancy felt their eyes on her back as she walked to Parker's booth, her legs steadier than they had any right to be. You didn't show fear in the Twilight District. Fear was blood in the water. Parker gestured to the seat across from her. Nancy sat. You have sharp eyes, Parker said, her accent carrying the weight of centuries, and sharper instincts. That is the 3rd time you've identified a threat before my own security. Just doing my job. Ma'am, your job is to serve drinks and collect credits. Parker leaned forward, her massive frame making the booth seem suddenly small. What you do is far more valuable. Tell me, Nancy Chen of Earth, why does a human with your observational skills work in a place like this? Nancy met those golden eyes without flinching. Another human trait, the stubborn refusal to look away. Same reason anyone works anywhere in the Twilight District. The credits are good, and nobody asks about my past. Parker's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Dragons could sense lies through pheromones, through micro-expressions, through 100 subtle tells that humans had learned to mask over generations of surviving among beings who could crush them with a thought. Truth, but not the whole truth. You could work anywhere on this station. Why here? Why continue serving a dragon who attracts assassins like gravity attracts asteroids? Nancy allowed herself a small smile. Because you tip well, ma'am. And because someone needs to keep you alive long enough to enjoy your Tarvasian whiskey. For a moment, Parker simply stared. Then she laughed a sound like avalanches on distant mountains, deep and primordial. Several patrons jumped. Nancy didn't. Humans, Parker said, shaking her massive head. You evolved on a death world, survived a dozen extinction events, conquered your own solar system before you could even manipulate gravity. And then you had the audacity to teach the rest of the galaxy about stubbornness. She reached into her jacket and produced a credit chip, sliding it across the table. This is for tonight, for the warning, and for the entertainment. Nancy glanced at the chip's display and nearly choked. It was enough to buy a small spacecraft. Mum, this is insufficient, Parker interrupted. But it will do for now. I'm offering you a position, Nancy Chen, not as a waitress, but as my personal security consultant. Humans see threats differently than my people do. You notice the small things, the wrong smile, the incorrect posture, details that might save my life. Nancy looked at the credit chip, then at the unconscious assassin being dragged away by Parker's guards, then back at the dragon who could end her existence with a casual breath of fire. I'll need to give 2 weeks' notice, Nancy said. Parker's laugh shook the glasses on every table in the obsidian scale. Humans, she repeated, and this time it sounded almost like a prayer. The galaxy never knew what hit it when your species reached the stars. Nancy pocketed the credit chip and stood, returning to her station to finish her shift. Tomorrow, her life would change. But tonight, she still had drinks to serve and tips to collect. Because that was the thing about humans, they finished what they started. No matter what waited in the darkness. And in a galaxy ruled by dragons. Sometimes that made all the difference.